recognize today as a Veterans Day, of course. For those of you that have served or have folks in your family that have served, thank you for your service and sacrifice. And make sure that we don't forget that. Big thank you to Perfect in Tampa and Bill Carlson for inviting us today to speak to you. And in the 8 to 10 minutes that we have today, that's what I've been told, that's how much time we got, we're going to try to cover quite a lot of ground. We're trying to give you sort of a refresher on what is the Arts Exchange, what is the Warehouse Arts District Association, how are they different, just so that you're aware of the different terms that are out there floating around. Then we're moving into really the challenges of a nonprofit that are maybe not so specific to WADA, but then from there move what's specifically challenging in our location. From that point, we're looking to make it relevant to Tampa and just try to see what kind of lessons are applicable to where you are here. So first and foremost, again, thank you for having us. There's a lot of ways to participate and to join us. One of the easiest ways to do it is to volunteer, to come for Second Saturday, which is tomorrow, to get on board as a sponsor, a donor, all these things that help us as a nonprofit. We're 10 years in, and that's sort of a good time to reflect on the past and see where have we come from, and what is our most immediate future. So we're very fortunate to be joined today by an iconic artist, the founder of the Warehouse Arts District Association, sculptor Mark Aeling. Good morning.
Thank you, Markus. And thank you, Bill, for the invitation to speak this morning. Very grateful for the opportunity. Just wanted to give a brief synopsis of what the last 10 years have been for the Warehouse Arts District. I'm going to go back a little bit further than that. In 2005, I moved my studio from St. Louis, Missouri, down to St. Petersburg after a fairly extensive search, and down the eastern seaboard to find a good location for the studio and a place that was somewhere warm near water. And was honestly very discouraged until I came across St. Pete and just fell in love with it. A burgeoning art community there, something of a twinkle in the eye, so to speak. But it was the beginning of something, and I go back to this point because one of the important things about the development of the district is that it happened organically. The artists came there because of the resources and the position that the community was in and that the city was in. The training tracks, the Pinellas Trail was the old train tracks, and because of the interstates, the train is no longer functioning, and that part of town had really kind of died out a little bit. And artists have this habit of moving into these rundown parts of town all over the world, and their creative energy brings development. It attracts attention, it brings development. That development drives up prices, and then we run into this problem where artists get pushed out. So creative communities tend to be very nomadic. And we started the Warehouse Arts District Association post-recession in 2012. The first meetings were in 2011, but we really got traction in 2012. One of our first major projects was to leverage the Downtown Partnership, who was instrumental in our development, and we leased trolleys from them. And this was done on the backs of different artists and arts organizations in the district area. And we did that so we could move people around and show them what was going on in the district, and it was wildly successful. So successful that after about 6 months, I sat down with one of our board members, Rob Kapusta, who's very influential in the city of St. Petersburg, and explained to him my concern and really my fear as an artist that our success was going to lead to the demise of my building, because it almost broke me to move my business down to St. Pete. The cost of transitioning the space and getting set up, I had cash set aside, but it was much more involved than I anticipated, and the thought of having to do that again, I really didn't know if I'd be able to keep my business alive. And I explained my concerns to Rob. And at the time, I had a building on a campus in the Warehouse Arts District, and I had about 4,000 square feet on a campus that was 2.7 acres with 55,000 square feet of warehouse. I was unable during the period of time from 2005 to 2012 to buy a studio building because of where the market was at and the amount of cost it cost me to transition my business. I had owned my studio in St. Louis. And the campus was way more than I could afford, and I explained to Rob, I've been looking for buildings, I can't find anything that works, and he said to me, why don't we use the 501c3 and raise funds through philanthropic means, through grants and donations, to purchase this property. And I thought, well, that sounds great. Is that really a possibility? I had no idea that something like that could happen. And with an organization, this was 2015, with an organization that was 3 years old and about $500 in our account, and board meetings that revolved around where trolleys were going to stop and who was putting up their signs and what way the trolley was going to turn at this intersection, we embarked upon a fundraiser. And in 6 months, we raised, it still brings emotion to me, we raised $350,000 in 6 months. And that's mainly because we had a good board that carried some credentials. We had some people that really believed in us, and we got a really big donation from the Pruitt Foundation, $200,000, and that put us over the top. So that's what started the Warehouse Arts District, and purchase of that property was the Arts Exchange, what became the Arts Exchange, and I thought we were there, and really we were just getting started. And at this point, we've raised over $2 million, and we've built out about 30 studio spaces, gallery space, and we just added an education center to the campus. We've got most of the existing campus revitalized. We've expanded to 2 additional properties, and we have room for growth onto those properties. And that's, we'll talk a little bit about what the future holds, but that's kind of in a nutshell how this has all evolved. And at that, I'll leave it to Markus to move this forward. And if you have any other questions about that history, I'd be happy to answer them in the question session.
From my perspective, switch mics for a second. Now you have the broken mic. From my perspective, I'm still somewhat new in St. Pete. Came here in June, even though I spent some time in town in 1998 to 99 at the Admiral Fairfield Academy. A lot has changed in the last 25 years. But I've been very fortunate to see how nonprofits work or don't work in a lot of different places in the country. I've worked in New Mexico, I've worked in New Jersey, worked in Florida, I've worked in Austria. Obviously that's not in this country. But I've seen some of these challenges, they're the same, Doesn't matter if you're in Albuquerque or Miami, doesn't matter if you're in Montclair, New Jersey, or in St. Pete. Some of the common denominators and the issues that we're facing is, of course, funding, corporate sponsorship, and it's really the majority of our nonprofit is really supported by individual donors. So that's a shift from maybe 20 years ago, where you would have that large bank sponsor or the airline sponsor, covering your festival or your entire nonprofit or whatever you're into. So that's very different. Staying relevant is another challenge that is just across the board. You have a mission statement that you start out with, and you always constantly check: is this mission still relevant? Are we really answering the challenges of the time? Are we really answering the challenges of our most immediate community? What problems are we solving? Are we still solving them? And so we just had a strategic meeting very, very recently, facilitated by Mr. Bill Carson. And we asked these questions. Is what we do today still relevant? And the answer is yes. With a but, we have to adapt certain things. We have to add on certain other elements to the original mission. So that's always a consideration. The demographics. No matter what nonprofit you work for, you're always trying to get in some fresh blood. I always challenge my staff when they come up with new ideas and new events. I ask them, would this be hip to a 14-year-old that lives in our neighborhood? 8 out of 10 times, the answer might be a no here. So we always want to make sure, is what we do attracting new audiences? And it's for very simple reasons. If we don't have new audiences coming in, we're looking at a very short lifespan of an organization. So that's across the board. If you're a presenter of classical music, if you are a nonprofit in the visual arts, we're always looking for ways to attract new audiences and to reach them. What is that people respond to? For a long time we thought, oh, it's social media. Now we're thinking, okay, to reach people really today, it has to be text messages. People will only respond to text messages at this point. So we're constantly trying to fine-tune how to reach new audiences. And then probably the biggest issue that we see across, not just this country, but across the world, is this perception that art should be free. And I think the pandemic has made it worse because a lot of things were put on Zoom and it's very difficult to charge for things that are online. But there's a reason why the concerts at the park are so crowded. There's a reason why Art Walk is such a success, because it's free. And what it does, as much as it helps with exposure, you can also die from exposure, but as much as it helps with exposure, it sort of dilutes the necessity for folks to actually pay for participating in the arts and for funding the arts. So that's something that we see across the world. That's the same in Austria, it's the same in Central Europe, it's the same in Asia. I've worked in Korea, in Taiwan, and all these places. There's a slightly different sensibility, but that's something I've noticed. And one thing that's maybe more specific to the United States is that culture, music, art, I find is mostly used as a secondary product. So that means that it's designed to sell something else. Maybe your concert ticket is selling a hotel package or a cruise ship package. Maybe the artwork you design is going on a coffee mug. So it's supposed to help push food and beverage sales. It's supposed to help push vacation sales. And so it's not so much, generally speaking, art for art's sake. And there's parts in Europe where that's still that culture of supporting art for the sake of art is still there. And I find this is a very big challenge in this country, is that art is used to push secondary products. So that's around the country, around the globe. Let's talk specifically about St. Pete, and I'm going to rely also on Mark Ellen's wisdom and hopefully also your input. But St. Pete is a unique city. It's a city of murals, right? For one, it's a city that has over 10 museums. Some of us might think it's just that one big one that everybody comes to see, but it's really 10. 40 galleries, one orchestra, one opera company, right? About 800 professionals working full-time in the arts, and an economy that produces $212 million a year from the arts. So this is serious business, because we're always trying to see what is the impact of the arts on the economy. And American for the Arts continue to do service. Actually, the Arts Alliance in St. Pete, they have service out there tomorrow and artwork to sort of to gauge what is the impact of the arts on commerce. I mean, one thing that we always see, which are indicators of that impact, is where there are art spaces, places are open later. You have a higher chance to be able to go to a cafe or to a restaurant or to a bar at 10 p.m. when there are art spaces around. You have a higher chance of a higher walkability score in places that have art spaces. You have a higher chance for spaces to be recognizable because people like to take pictures in neighborhoods that have arts. Another very straight economic consideration, when you rent in a place that has art spaces, the rent is higher because it's more desirable to live there, right? So we continuously try to get people to understand, get the city to understand, get developers to understand the value of the arts to a community. And one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in St. Pete right now, which I'm sure you're aware of, are just the incredible high rent prices. You know, a real estate market that has certainly overheated, and it's brought us to a place where we're reconsidering, or we are looking to expand our mission in the very near future, and that mission has very much to do with workforce housing.
We'll see if the charge holds on this. So, as I mentioned, we acquired some additional property as an organization. We're property rich and cash poor, but there was a serious land grab in St. Petersburg, particularly in the boundaries of the Warehouse Arts District. And we did everything we could to leverage every relationship, every dollar, every bit of grant funding that we could get to get a hold of as much property as possible. And we were able to end up with just under 6 total acres for what is now. And as we look at the circumstance that we have in St. Pete, where in 2017 you could get a 1-bedroom rental for $1,000. Right now, we're looking at, in 2022, $2,000 or more for that exact same unit. That is the kind of inflation that will push artists out of the community. And it's wonderful to have subsidized rents for studio space, but if an artist has to commute 60, 90, 120 minutes to get to that studio space, is that realistic? I can answer that question for you. The answer is no. It's not realistic. So we're looking right now at opportunities to develop workforce housing, studio and live workspace, basically, on the campus that would focus around the trail as a central point of egress. You know, everybody in St. Petersburg right now is talking about workforce housing. And unfortunately, this conversation is coming about 5 years behind the curve where it should have been happening. But my experience has been that the city is very focused on development. And when it comes to the arts, they have been considered a good marketing position, but they haven't really invested in the creative community. And that's something that is a real struggle to get folks both on the municipal side of the coin and on the private development side of the coin to recognize that investing in this thing that everyone is leveraging is a good idea. Because if they don't, it's going to go away. And then you have nothing to leverage. So it takes a little forethought and a lot of talking. And it's a challenge. It's a big challenge.
Okay, well, I'm not sure how we're doing in time. And I see that Dell is coming up, so that might mean that we're going to get very close to the Q&A. That's the case.
Yes.
Then, I mean, if you only take one thing away from what I'm saying, obviously, hopefully you take everything away from what he's saying. If you only take one thing away from what I'm saying is, you know, remember how our mindsets shifted about 25 to 30 years ago about the environment. You know, we were thinking about all the kinds of things to reduce emissions, to be environmentally conscious. Think about all these measures that we're taking and now understand that this is what we need to do for the arts and culture.